Welcome to the Information Security Summit 2020 Virtual Edition. Today's presentation is part 2 of 3 on DevSecOps. The presentation today will be provided by John Meyer of ASMGI and Frank Yako of ASMGI. Take it away, John.
Yeah, thanks for joining us for the second session. My name is John Meyer. This session is How Do I DevSecOps, presented to you by ASMGI. I'm the solutions architect at ASMGI, focusing on cloud and DevSecOps, and I'll let Frank introduce himself.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Frank Yako with ASMGI as well, and I have a opportunity to speak with John today, and my role at ASMGI is CIO and Director of Strategic Initiatives. Thanks, John.
Yep. So the agenda for this, we left off in our last presentation. That was more of a presentation based around how to conduct a DevSecOps assessment for an organization, figure out where that organization is at, and how to kind of make a plan of how it needs to, what it needs to do to get where it needs to go. So this is kind of piggybacking off of that, some of the things that we learned in the first session, how do we apply them? So, first is making sure everyone knows that there's security at every level, and the importance of performing a security and risk assessment, the importance of automation throughout the software development lifecycle, and especially in the testing phase, and how that relates to security, dashboards and alerts for continuous monitoring, and being in a continuous state of compliance and what that means to be in a continuous state of compliance. So, we've got some objectives that we're trying to cover here. Now that we've learned how to assess our current maturity in DevSecOps in the model, how do you implement, the things that you've learned, and how do you implement the proper people, processes, and tools to create a mature DevSecOps program? So, in this presentation, we're going to be going over methods to implement a DevSecOps program or a DevOps program, learning how to implement and integrate security tools and processes throughout the software development lifecycle, the importance of automation, again, can't drive that home enough, the importance of continuous monitoring, and how to maintain a continuous state of compliance throughout the model. It starts and ends with security. So, we've been trying to point out, this is our DevOps life cycle down here at the bottom, and how do we get to DevSecOps, and noticing that everything in there has security kind of looped in and throughout, and it's seamlessly integrated into each phase. So, getting there is sometimes tricky, but the key is to really, again, integrate these processes so that it's seamless and it's just part of the development cycle. Most important thing, you have to know where you're at to know how to reach the destination. So just like on any map you look at, there's several ways to get where you want to go with DevSecOps, and so it all comes down to prioritizing. Completing an assessment, determine what's needed to create a successful DevSecOps program. That's the first step in all of this. And then with the assessment complete, that's when it's time to prioritize and remediate.
John, before you leave this slide, just wanted to highlight, a couple of things there. One is the reference to the program. As we referenced in the prior session, this is a program. There's multiple initiatives as part of this that needs to be taken into account. The other is with an assessment, a lot of times it's difficult to understand just where to begin. So that's one of the things, as you note, it's important to prioritize those items and then have a plan so that you can ultimately execute against that plan. An assessment without any type of actionable, activities is just not going to help the organization.
Definitely agree with that. So how do we find a method to the model? You know, as we've tried to drive home the point, you know, evaluating roles, processes, and tools, making sure that each role, process, and tool has a purpose and brings value to the organization. You know, making these changes is going to require a level of justification to the business, a level of financial justification potentially, a level of justification to security. Uh, you know, there's many levels that it's going to have to go through, that these changes will have to go through in a business uh, to make sure that it's worth doing and that it's going to provide value. Um, Trying to find if there's any bottlenecks currently, you know, and if any of these solutions or, you know, any parts of this program are going to help alleviate those bottlenecks. And then finally, through the assessment, figuring out if there's anything missing, just completely missing, whether it's, you know, a role, a process, a tool within the software development lifecycle or the DevSecOps model, you know, within the company. Is there just something that's not even being done at this time, or something that's not there? And finally, thinking of this whole thing as designing for an outcome. So knowing what you want your business to be, having a vision to be able to know where you want to be at the end of all of this. I think, you know, when organizations do that, it makes it a lot easier to try and plan, and it makes it a lot easier to prioritize, because you know from the outset what type of organization you want to be after the transformation. This is kind of a fun slide, choosing the right blank for the job, choosing and implementing processes and tooling. So I've listed some processes and tools here. Threat modeling, penetration testing, code scans, reviews, different compliances, you know, container and OS security, web application firewalls, you know, and network protocols. So how do you choose the right tool or the right process for completing that list of bullet points? You know, there's several ways you can do these things, and you know, I think it's a combination of all four that are listed here. You know, listing pros and cons. One thing that I found throughout, you know, things that I've done that's helped me be more effective in choosing a tool or choosing a process is RACI diagrams. You know, just really mapping everything out and figuring out what the features and benefits of something are, what the cost could be behind it, doing a cost analysis, and then finally risk analysis. You know, what does it mean to the business from a risk analysis standpoint? If this is going to make something, you know, more secure and protect the business, that's a huge bonus. And if you can come in below budget, another huge bonus. And I kind of want to kick it over to Frank, because he, you know, Frank's a big proponent of RACI diagrams, and he's been, you know, he's helped me through a lot of the processes of trying to, you know, distill what tools and processes to implement in our own organization.
Thanks, John. So as John mentioned, you know, the items in blue on the right are really the elements that help to, you know, not only organize the efforts for executing against a program like this, but also are critical for communicating within the organization, both from a cross-functional perspective to make sure everyone is synchronized on what the benefits are from a pros and cons perspective, you know, how to approach the implementation of these tools and these capabilities. And that's really the RACI diagram, as far as responsible, accountable, consulted, informed, so that there's no gaps in understanding the plan and approach to who has what ownership of those particular items. And the cost and risk analysis are critical when communicating as part of an organization with the governance team that may be managing this overall program or having the oversight for that, as well as communicating with the C-level within an organization from an overall cost and risk benefit perspective. So those are items that, you know, if you account for those as part of your overall plan, it facilitates communications, and then also make sure that it's evident the value that that this type of approach brings to the organization as well.
Thanks. You know, the other thing that I really wanted to point out through all this too is right here. Security is everyone's responsibility. You know, showing this graphic again. I know I've shown it a lot throughout the last 2 sessions here, but it really shows you, because these processes are integrated so tightly into the software development lifecycle, something that's really important that I kind of grabbed from a website, but I thought it was really, really pertinent, was empowering developers to suggest critical security changes. So, you know, never underestimate the value that anybody can provide in the security world. You're only as strong as your weakest link in an organization and in many other aspects of life. So, you know, making everybody accountable for security and empowering teams with tools and expertise to respond to and neutralize threats before they become a major issue. As you can see throughout the whole model, whether it's on the ops side with, administration tasks for the infrastructure or monitoring, or whether it's, within the development side of things where it's, in the planning, the coding, building and testing, empowering each of the roles that contribute to those phases to own a piece of the security organization within the business is pretty key in making them care about it, or encouraging them to care about it. Frank, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add to that. I mean, you've been around a lot, so.
Yeah, I think you made the key points as far as this becoming everyone's responsibility. There's no just throwing the rock over the wall from a developer or operations to security or vice versa, and trying to do the blame game or anything like that. If everyone's aware and clear that security is each person's responsibility, that's baked into the overall model, and then it becomes a team working together to ensure that there are no threats or risks that the organization is going to have to take on because of that sort of overall view of an assumption that it is the overall team's responsibility to deal with these things. And if everyone's looking at it that way, then it's amazing the magic that can happen as a result.
Well, and we're going to show here too, just how we empower developers to suggest those security changes, and everybody else, anybody else that might be in that software development lifecycle graphic there. So, there's definitely tools that are going to empower them from a code scanning perspective and stuff like that, but kind of to Frank's point about tossing things over the wall. So I'm not going to get into everything that's shown on this slide, like each DevOps methodology, but I wanted to put this on here. I thought it was really informative. I going through it, I noticed there was, different companies that I've worked for, or different companies that I've worked with, in consulting capacity and stuff like that. And I could pick out what model they were using when I looked at this, based on whether they only had a dev and an ops side that kind of overlapped, or the Google model, for instance, over in the upper right hand corner there, where it's devs and DevOps and SREs and ops. So it was kind of a fun graphic to dive into and see where different organizations sit, and none of these are wrong. Some of them just happen to be better for different scenarios than others, and that's kind of to bring home what else, the other aspects that I put here on the slide. It's not a one size fits all. A DevOps model is something you need to find that suits your organization or project need, and to follow that up, it can be as broad as an organization, or it can be as granular as a project. If you're a smaller company that's developing, one piece of software, this is probably going to end up being an organization-wide model that you use. But, if you're a multinational corporation, that has a lot of different departments and a lot of different disciplines to it. Where maybe it's a healthcare company or something, and part of that healthcare is you know you know, making sanitizers and stuff like that. And then part of it might be a manufacturing side where they manufacture instrument sanitization equipment. They have different disciplines within their business. So they might use, a DevOps model for one type of software development that they're doing for one thing, and then another for another, and it might be team-based or something like that. So I thought it was an interesting graphic, and when we provide PDFs of this presentation, it's definitely something that I think would be good for a lot of people to look into, especially when you're trying to assess your own organization and what direction and in model you should adopt. And then I had a quick tweet down here. A goal for a DevOps team should be to put itself out of business by enabling the rest of the org. It kind of goes to working together. But yeah, Frank, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, no, I think you make a key point as far as the, not one size fits all, but it's important to have a plan and to have a model that you're executing against consciously, and to be making sure everyone is familiar with what that model is, because as you mentioned, there's all types of different organization configurations. There's, even, in cases where maybe an organization is a software as a service type of scenario where you have clients that you're providing software solutions to, and you have compliance requirements that you have to meet. So you might have a different relationship with your clients than within your own internal organization. And then, as you mentioned, there might be a large organization that maybe have a shared services model where there's corporate services provided to divisions. Those are all things that you need to understand, how you want to deliver those services to clients or your organization, and then, how to best align those based on executing against the DevSecOps model. And then just make sure that that's reinforced with the team and the organization.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, all these scenarios apply to something different. So, depending on the type of business you are, depending on the type of teams that you have, or the type of software development methodology that you can have a different fit here and there. And just for more fun, methods to avoid. I thought this was particularly interesting because, again, having worked with different companies and stuff, I looked at some of these and I was like, yeah, I remember company X doing that. That was kind of their method, and there was always a lot of frustration with whatever. So these, I think, when you really look at them, it becomes kind of apparent like why they're not the best methods for companies to adopt. So kind of going on to the next stage of this, tools to enable secure code. So this is a big one. Going back to that slide again, enabling your developers, to be part of the security process and make security recommendations. There's several different tools that you can use to enable secure code, and they should all be used in tandem, really. Software composition analysis, or SCA, is something that addresses open source and license compliance. There's a couple different facets to that. SAST, or secure application or static application security testing, is something you can perform on the source. It's a scan you can perform on the source code, either by having it look at a repo or actually enabling it within the pipeline. And depending on who the vendor is, some of them allow you to do both, and some of them allow you to only do one or the other with their tool. But it's one of those things where you do it the best way that works for you. If developers are using it, they might choose to put it right in the pipeline. If a member of the security team is doing it, they might want to have it look down on the repositories and just have review meetings to go over the vulnerabilities and stuff like that. DAST, dynamic application security testing. This is a form of web security scanning. So for those security folks on, listening to this, WAS scans, WAS, Web Application Security, that's probably something you've heard of. These are very important, when you're trying to find those security loopholes from a access perspective. Interactive security scanning. So that would, or testing, that would be, kind of like real time. And you could do that in a QA environment or something like that before, it's actually released to production, but actually testing the application while it's running. IDE plugins are another thing that's becoming bigger. I don't think this is quite full-fledged yet. I noticed some vendors have different plugins than others. No one really has the full gamut quite yet, but real-time code scanning in the development environment. So, if a developer's using IntelliJ or Visual Studio, they can have a plugin for that, and it'll actually scan while they're coding. And then finally, not so much a tool, more of, it requires tooling, but it's more, your methods and everything. Automated testing within, a CI/CD tool. So if you're using Azure DevOps, or if you're using TeamCity or Jenkins, or any of the other CI/CD tools that are out there, most of those enable you to do automated testing on some level, which has its own security benefits as well. More testing you do before you. Oh, sure.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, the more testing you do before you release it in the wild, the better.
So there's obviously a lot of acronyms here, but again, these are just some individuals might have heard of some of these tools, but the question I had was, what part of the life cycle are these tools or capabilities being used, and typically who are the individuals that are using them?
Yeah, so I included this graphic down at the bottom of the slide, actually. Most of these tools are going to be, I would say, a joint effort between security and the developers, because most of these tools are either running as part of the development phase, test phase, or the build phase. So with the exception of DAST, DAST can be done, in a QA environment after, when the code's released, and that's going to test, web access and stuff like that. But the development phase is where you're going to see like more of like static analysis done, software composition analysis, things of that nature. And as it shows, as the graphic shows, dynamic test, dynamic analysis is going to be either in the test phase or in, QA, something like that. And then, on through deployment. So it's really probably more on the development side of that DevOps graphic for most of these.
Well, part of the reason for my question was just that exact point, that there's no reason why the types of potential issues that are identified through these has to wait until further, down in the development cycle or even in the final testing before going to production process. By empowering, as we talked about, the development team early on in the life cycle, these types of issues can be identified well before it becomes very costly to deal with those. And then it doesn't mean that a developer has to be able to understand every last detail that's identified through one of these tools. That's where, working with the security team can help to determine, or operations team, what's required to remediate those. But it certainly starts well in the early stages of the life cycle, versus, like we said, waiting until well downstream.
Sure. And going back to the last session, it definitely does take pressure off, at the end of the line with the security team, because it's being done earlier upstream. So, I just wanted to include, types of software testing, just to kind of drive home the automation piece too. So I think it's important to know what we're talking about when we're talking about testing and what we're automating with the testing. And this kind of a brief overview of that: unit testing, smoke testing, integration, system, regression testing, load testing. That's really what we're trying to automate, because the more frequently we can test and the more automated it is, the more weaknesses we can find within the software before it's actually released. And it's depending on the CI/CD tool you use. Sometimes you can even put stops in there where it won't deploy if it sees some of those weaknesses. So testing automation for secure code and secure applications, there's obvious reasons to do this. There's benefits to it. So eliminating human error. I'm not going to go and read this whole list, but eliminating human error, that could be a huge security benefit, because obviously I think a lot of issues that arise for a lot of these companies that have been getting hacked recently, there's a good proportion of that's human error, or a weakness in the software that wasn't found because loose DevOps practices or software development practices. Determining, being able to determine the stability of your build quicker. The more stable your build is, the more it's going to be able to stand up to. So and just being able to get better insights. The more you can test and the faster you can test, the more you can get better, accurate data back on the application itself, and what you can do to improve it. Also getting, I think broader test coverage, I think is one to point out too, because again, just frequency. The more you're testing, the more you're finding, the more you're fixing.
Well, it's just part of what you're referring to here is also from the time of automation piece of it. If it's something that's done at the time of code check-in or continual scanning, it's not something that someone has to consciously decide to do. And that's probably one of the keys to this whole sort of approach, is that it does take that element out of the mix. And then, depending on, whether you're implementing these tools in tandem, with even, some type of workflow solution, you can create tickets or incidents that then can be automatically escalated and tracked, so that you're not, losing track of the fact that these things have been identified and that they exist and may have to be remediated, through whatever parts of the team.
Yep. Continuous monitoring and alerting and dashboards. How is this important? I think a lot of us have had dashboard fatigue, as I'll call it, or alert fatigue as well, depending on where you're at. How do we make sure that we have effective monitoring? Again, this comes back to making specific use cases and business cases, but we want to make sure above all that we have effective monitoring for the whole life cycle. So systems, applications, infrastructure, and security. Effective monitoring is by itself, with the right people and the right tools, is going to lead to more meaningful alerts. So going back to alert fatigue, I think we've all been there, depending on where we've worked, where you almost tune out because you're getting so many emails all the time. So meaningful alerts are going to lead to the next point: more accurate reporting. This is going to allow all of that, is to say that effective monitoring, meaningful alerts, accurate reporting, it's going to lead to a better process for a business to remediate any security issues or any software weaknesses that they have to remediate. It's also going to provide them the opportunity to have more accurate risk assessments. There's going to be more accurate historical data to go back on and allow for more accurate future predictions as well. So I think that this is something that is definitely very important and needs to be a main focus for any kind of successful DevSecOps program. I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add to that, Frank.
Yeah, I mean, this also ties into the fact that all of these things should be continual, as you state, and not events. So if if there's a regular cadence for the items that are identified through this, and then, and tying that back into change control and change management, then it makes it easy or easier to determine, based on the risk of a particular item, what action should be taken, how to prioritize that, and ultimately, making sure that the team is in lockstep with how to organize itself to execute against those items.
Agreed. And most tools these days, especially monitoring tools, they have hooks into change management systems as well. So every year, I think this is something that gets easier and easier. It's just a matter of an organization implementing everything properly and using it effectively. Continuous compliance. This is the last huge bullet point that I wanted to make. And again, this goes back to, if you've got a successful DevSecOps program and you've got the right people, processes, and technology, compliance is almost going to be a given in certain ways, because you've got all those right things in place, and so you can consistently go back and get accurate reporting, leading to easier retrieval of data for audits. If you have compliance audits that you have to meet and stuff like that. So being able to just have a process that's continuously incorporating all of those tools and those processes is going to lead to a state of continuous compliance almost on its own. But just being able to quickly react as well and be agile as an organization, detecting weaknesses and responding to those and remediating those is huge. And I think that's the biggest gain out of a successful DevSecOps program that an organization can have.
Yeah, and as part of that too, obviously, again, it depends on an organization's business model and who their clients are. There might be multiple compliance requirements that an organization might have. It's something that, in some cases, the frequency is increasing as far as any audits or the reporting of findings. The days of either even every an annual process or every other year are quickly being compressed as far as the responsibilities that an organization has. So to make all of that less of, again, an event and just something that can very easily be generated and reported against, allows an organization to demonstrate to its clients or even its own organization, how it's meeting those requirements. And if you know that those are the ultimate goals, then that can be built into the tool sets that are selected and how those are implemented. And then same thing as far as the roles go, that it's clear, what processes have to be done, so that when it is a requirement to demonstrate the compliance with whether it's HIPAA, whether it's SOC 2 or whatever the case may be, there's no issues with being able to provide evidence and to demonstrate compliance in that particular scenario.
Definitely. So what's next? I definitely want to thank everyone for joining us for this session. Hopefully it's been insightful, different ways that you can start incorporating some of these DevSecOps practices in your organization. Our next session is definitely going to focus on ways to do that and how to apply some of the priorities that we've identified through a DevSecOps assessment. So we're going to have some workshops on implementing a static application security testing tool, a software composition analysis tool, and a dynamic application security testing tool. So I think we've got some good things coming. And again, I just wanted to thank everybody. And if there's any more information that you want to request, our email address is there. And I hope, like I said, once again, I hope everyone got some good information out of this.
Yes, thank you as well. And as we mentioned in the previous session, there's no question that, and as we depicted on the one slide, having that roadmap, understanding where your organization is at, and then applying those items that are identified, and then putting that overall governance and program in place can be extremely effective. So then meeting those objectives, whether that's improving your overall risk profile, decreasing the friction that might occur within the organization for delivering solutions to your organization or even a service to your clients, is the ultimate goal of this. And as John mentioned in the next session, and as a result of the assessment process, those tools that John mentioned are being demonstrated, and you can see how to actually apply that to your overall program and the solutions that you're delivering. So thanks again, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next session.
Thanks, everyone.